At 2:17 in the morning on January 2nd, I received the termination email that would destroy 5 years of company data in exactly 36 minutes. My badge deactivated while I was still logged into the cloud infrastructure systems I had built from scratch 3 years earlier. The automated security protocols I designed began their cascading shutdown sequence, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. I watched helplessly as warning alerts flooded every screen, counting down the minutes until complete system failure. They fired the only person who understood the fail-safe system I created to protect against corporate betrayal. Now, those same protections would erase everything. 3 years ago, I walked into TechFlow Solutions as Gladys Patterson, a 28-year-old junior systems administrator with big dreams and even bigger ideas about cybersecurity. The company occupied 3 floors of a gleaming office building in downtown Seattle, housing 200 employees who developed cloud-based software solutions for mid-sized businesses across the Pacific Northwest. Marcus Wright, the chief technology officer who hired me, was everything you'd want in a boss. He had silver hair that spoke of experience laugh lines around his eyes that showed he genuinely enjoyed his work, and a handshake that conveyed both strength and warmth. During my interview, he leaned back in his ergonomic chair and asked the question that would change everything. "Gladys, if you could redesign our entire infrastructure from the ground up, what would you do differently?" Most candidates probably gave safe, conventional answers. I pulled out my laptop and showed him a presentation I had prepared on advanced security architecture, complete with fail-safe protocols that could protect against both external threats and internal corporate malfeasance. Marcus's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. "When can you start?" he asked before I finished explaining my third slide. The TechFlow culture in those early days felt like a family reunion where everyone actually liked each other. Developers collaborated across departments, sharing coffee and code snippets with equal enthusiasm. The marketing team celebrated every client success as if it were their own birthday. Sandra Fleming, the human resources director, seemed genuinely interested in employee well-being, organizing monthly team-building events, and maintaining an open-door policy for workplace concerns. My first week on the job, I discovered security vulnerabilities that made my skin crawl. The existing cloud infrastructure looked like it had been designed by someone who thought passwords were just suggestions. Critical databases sat behind authentication systems that a determined teenager could crack during summer vacation. Customer financial information lived on servers with security protocols dating back to the early 2000s. "Marcus," I said during our second weekly meeting, "we're one phishing email away from a complete disaster." He rubbed his forehead and sighed. "I know. Previous administration prioritized speed over security. How bad is it really? Imagine leaving your house unlocked, windows open, with a sign on the front lawn advertising your vacation schedule and safe combination," I replied. "That's our current security posture." Marcus approved my proposal for a complete infrastructure overhaul that same afternoon. For the next 18 months, I lived and breathed cloud architecture, designing custom security protocols that would make Fort Knox jealous. I created sophisticated admin hierarchy systems with multiple redundancies, ensuring that no single person could accidentally compromise the entire network. But the crown jewel of my design was something I called the Guardian Protocol. This advanced fail-safe system monitored all administrative activities, looking for patterns that suggested corporate espionage, hostile takeovers, or sudden personnel changes that could compromise security. If the system detected suspicious activity, particularly the abrupt termination of key personnel without proper transition procedures, it would automatically protect company data by moving everything to encrypted offshore servers. The Guardian Protocol required a Level 5 administrator clearance, which only I possessed due to the system's complexity. I had written every line of code, designed every backup procedure, and created every authentication pathway. Marcus repeatedly promised to promote me to senior systems architect once the implementation was complete, recognizing that my innovations had transformed TechFlow into the most secure mid-sized tech company on the West Coast. Everything changed during our third year when the company entered a rapid growth phase. We landed contracts with major corporations, doubled our client base, and started attracting attention from larger tech companies looking for acquisition opportunities. The collaborative family atmosphere began shifting toward corporate hierarchy as new management layers appeared between employees and decision-makers. David Rodriguez joined our team as a junior developer, bringing fresh energy and an infectious enthusiasm for clean coding practices. Janet Torres arrived as the new vice president of finance, bringing Wall Street experience and sharp questions about IT spending that made everyone slightly uncomfortable. The office buzzed with ambitious expansion plans, but something fundamental was changing in the corporate DNA. During my final system testing phase, I made a discovery that kept me awake for 3 straight nights. The Guardian protocol was more powerful than I had initially anticipated. Rather than simply locking out unauthorized users, the system would completely purge data to prevent corporate espionage if it detected certain threat patterns. The failsafe could potentially trigger catastrophic data loss if mishandled by someone who didn't understand its intricacies. I spent 2 weeks refining the protocols, adding additional safeguards, and creating detailed documentation about proper administrative procedures. But I also realized that this system represented the ultimate protection against corporate betrayal. If management ever tried to steal my work or eliminate my position without proper transition protocols, the Guardian system would ensure they couldn't benefit from intellectual property theft. I encrypted all the core documentation and stored it in secure files that only I could access. The company had invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in my security architecture. Anyone who wanted to inherit that investment would need to respect the person who created it. 12 months ago, everything I thought I knew about corporate loyalty crumbled like a sand castle at high tide. TechFlow Solutions received an acquisition offer from Megatech Industries, a massive corporation that collected smaller tech companies, like some people collect vintage stamps. The announcement came during an all-hands meeting on a rainy Thursday morning in November. Marcus Wright stood at the front of our main conference room, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something that looked suspiciously like defeat. The silver hair I had always associated with wisdom now seemed to reflect the weight of decisions made above his pay grade. "This acquisition represents an incredible opportunity for growth," Marcus said, reading from prepared remarks that clearly weren't his own words. "Megatech's resources will allow us to scale our operations and reach new markets we never thought possible." But his eyes told a different story. They spoke of late-night phone calls with corporate lawyers of spreadsheets that reduced human beings to line items of a company culture about to be fed through an industrial shredder. Within 6 weeks, Marcus Wright was gone. Not fired officially, just restructured out of existence as Megatech streamlined duplicate management positions. His replacement arrived like a cold front moving through the Pacific Northwest, bringing efficiency metrics and cost reduction strategies that made everyone's teeth ache. Alex Morrison possessed the kind of polished corporate appearance that magazines use to illustrate articles about successful business leaders. His suits cost more than my monthly rent. His handshake felt like a performance evaluation, and his smile never quite reached his eyes. During our first team meeting, he explained his philosophy of lean operations and optimized resource allocation using so much business jargon that I needed a translator. "Moving forward," Alex announced, "we'll be implementing best practices to eliminate redundancies and streamline operational efficiency across all departments." David Rodriguez leaned over and whispered, "Did he just say he's going to fire people using 5 times as many words?" The new policies started small, but grew like kudzu in summer heat. Every system required extensive documentation. Every procedure needed approval from multiple management layers. Every decision had to be justified through cost-benefit analysis and quarterly impact projections. Alex Morrison specifically requested complete documentation of our cloud infrastructure, claiming Megatech's security auditors needed comprehensive system maps. I provided detailed explanations of our architecture security protocols and user management systems. But I kept the core Guardian protocol documentation encrypted, explaining that the fail-safe systems required gradual transition procedures to prevent accidental triggering. "We need everything documented for compliance purposes," Alex insisted during one particularly tense meeting. "No exceptions." "I understand the requirement," I replied. "But these security protocols are specifically designed to prevent unauthorized access to critical systems. Proper transition procedures take time to implement safely." Alex's jaw tightened like he was chewing on my words and finding them unpalatable. "How much time?" "Minimum 30 days with proper training and authentication transfers," I explained. "The Guardian protocol requires multiple verification steps to ensure legitimate administrative changes." That's when I noticed Sandra Fleming taking detailed notes about my responses. The woman who had once organized birthday parties and employee appreciation events now watched me with the intensity of someone conducting a performance evaluation. Her questions became sharper, her smile more manufactured, her interest in my job satisfaction suspiciously thorough. 3 months after the acquisition, Alex Morrison brought in Pinnacle Consulting, an external firm specializing in IT optimization for large corporations. Linda Parker, Pinnacle's lead consultant, arrived with charts and graphs that supposedly proved our department was overstaffed by 37%. "Current infrastructure can be managed more efficiently," Linda explained during a presentation that felt like watching my professional obituary being written in PowerPoint. "Modern cloud management tools eliminate the need for specialized administrative roles." I watched her recommendations with growing alarm. She was essentially proposing to dismantle the security architecture I had spent 3 years building, replacing custom protocols with generic corporate solutions that would leave TechFlow vulnerable to exactly the kind of data breaches that destroyed companies overnight. During a coffee break, I cornered David Rodriguez near the break room vending machine that always ate quarters on Wednesdays. "They're planning to outsource the entire IT department," I told him quietly. Linda Parker's recommendations would eliminate every position except basic help desk support. David's face went pale. "Can they actually do that?" "With Megatech's backing, they can do whatever maximizes quarterly profits," I replied. "Customer security becomes someone else's problem." That afternoon, I called Marcus Wright at his new position with Cloud Secure Technologies. His voice carried the weariness of someone who had watched this story play out before. "Gladys, I wish I could say I'm surprised," Marcus said. "But Megatech has a pattern. They acquire companies for their client lists and intellectual property, then gut operational costs to boost short-term revenues." "What about the Guardian protocol?" I asked. "If they eliminate my position without proper transition procedures." "Document everything," Marcus advised. "Create a paper trail showing you warned them about security requirements. If something goes wrong, you want evidence that you tried to prevent it." I spent the following weeks creating comprehensive warnings about the risks of improper administrative transitions. I sent detailed emails to Alex Morrison explaining how the Guardian protocol required specific deactivation procedures. I scheduled meetings with Sandra Fleming to discuss the timeline for proper documentation transfers. I even prepared a presentation for the board of directors outlining the potential consequences of hasty IT reorganization. Every warning was acknowledged with polite corporate language and filed away in folders that would never be opened again. On December 15th, I intercepted an email chain between Alex Morrison and Sandra Fleming that made my blood run cold. The subject line read Q1 Personnel Optimization Timeline. The contents discussed my termination date scheduled for January 2nd to maximize year-end financial reporting. Target completion of system documentation by December 31st, Sandra had written. Termination effective immediately following New Year transition period. Consultant replacement begins January 3rd. They wanted my knowledge without my employment. They planned to steal 3 years of intellectual property development, then eliminate the person who created it. The acquisition hadn't been about growth or opportunity. It had been about asset stripping disguised as corporate efficiency. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I modified the Guardian protocol to be even more sensitive to administrative changes, particularly sudden account deactivations during holiday periods when proper oversight was minimal. I created a hidden trigger that would activate if my admin access was revoked without the mandatory 30-day transition period I had repeatedly explained was necessary for security compliance. If Alex Morrison and Sandra Fleming wanted to betray 3 years of dedicated service, they would discover that some security systems bite back when mishandled. The Guardian protocol would protect TechFlow's data from unauthorized access, even if that unauthorized access came from the company's own management. I encrypted the modification logs and stored them with timestamp verification that would prove my warnings had been ignored. Whatever happened next, the responsibility would rest squarely on the shoulders of people who valued cost savings over cybersecurity best practices. The next 6 months felt like watching a slow-motion train wreck while being tied to the tracks. Every day brought new evidence that Alex Morrison and Sandra Fleming were systematically preparing to eliminate my position while stealing everything I had built. In July, Megatech's corporate security team demanded complete system documentation for what they called a comprehensive security audit. Alex Morrison presented this as a routine compliance requirement, but I recognized it for what it really was: intellectual property theft disguised as due diligence. I provided everything they requested, except the core Guardian protocol authentication codes. Those remained encrypted in secure files that required my personal biometric verification to access. When Alex Morrison pressed for complete documentation, I explained that certain security protocols required additional time to properly document without compromising system integrity. These aren't just passwords, I told him during a meeting that felt more like an interrogation. The Guardian protocol uses multi-layer authentication with biometric verification and geographic location confirmation. Documenting those procedures improperly could create security vulnerabilities. Alex Morrison's patience was wearing thinner than ice on a Seattle sidewalk. Gladys, we need complete documentation, no exceptions. Megatech's timeline doesn't accommodate delays. Then Megatech's timeline needs to accommodate cybersecurity best practices, I replied. Unless you want to explain to federal regulators why customer financial data was compromised because proper procedures weren't followed. That conversation ended with Alex Morrison making notes in a leather portfolio that I was pretty sure contained my professional death sentence. Meanwhile, I had quietly begun exploring other opportunities. 3 major tech companies in the Bay Area expressed serious interest in my security architecture experience. Cloud Secure Technologies, where Marcus Wright now served as Senior Vice President, offered a compelling position developing next-generation cybersecurity protocols for government contractors. But I also started noticing subtle changes in my work environment that felt like psychological warfare. My access to certain corporate systems was gradually restricted without explanation. Meeting invitations that should have included me began arriving late or not at all. Sandra Fleming scheduled informal check-ins that felt suspiciously like performance evaluation fishing expeditions. "How are you feeling about your role here at TechFlow?" Sandra asked during one of these ambush conversations. Are you satisfied with your current responsibilities and growth opportunities? I've been satisfied with my work, I replied carefully, though I've noticed some changes in communication patterns that concern me. Changes? Sandra's eyebrows arched with practiced innocence. What kind of changes? System access restrictions, meeting exclusions, requests for documentation that bypass normal security protocols, I said. It feels like someone's preparing to eliminate my position. Sandra's smile could have been carved from ice. Gladys, I think you're reading too much into routine administrative adjustments. Your position is secure as long as your performance meets corporate standards. That phrase, as long as your performance meets corporate standards, echoed in my head like a threat wrapped in human resources terminology. By November, the writing was on the wall in letters 10 feet tall. Linda Parker from Pinnacle Consulting was spending increasing amounts of time in our offices, shadowing my daily activities and asking detailed questions about system administration procedures. She claimed to be conducting an operational efficiency analysis, but I could see her taking notes about everything I did. Interesting security protocols, Linda commented one afternoon while watching me run routine maintenance procedures. Very sophisticated for a company this size. Who developed these systems? I did, I replied, not bothering to hide my pride in 3 years of innovative work. Custom architecture designed specifically for TechFlow's operational requirements. And you're the only one who understands how they work. The question sounded innocent enough, but I heard the trap being set. I'm the primary architect and administrator. Other team members understand their specific areas of responsibility, but the integrated security protocols require specialized knowledge to maintain safely. Linda Parker made more notes in her tablet. I was pretty sure she was calculating how much money Megatech could save by replacing me with generic corporate IT support. December arrived like a messenger carrying bad news. The company announced a clean slate reorganization scheduled for New Year's Day, promising fresh starts and optimized operational structures. Alex Morrison held an all-hands meeting explaining how this reorganization would position TechFlow for unprecedented growth in the coming year. We're streamlining our organizational structure to eliminate redundancies and maximize efficiency, Alex announced with the enthusiasm of someone reading stock prices. Every position will be evaluated based on its contribution to our core mission and long-term strategic goals. David Rodriguez caught my eye from across the conference room. His expression suggested he was hearing the same subtext I was. They were about to fire a bunch of people and wanted to make it sound like corporate evolution. After the meeting, Sandra Fleming called me into her office for what she described as my year-end performance evaluation. The conversation felt like being slowly strangled with corporate policies. Your technical skills are undeniably impressive. Sandra began consulting a file that seemed suspiciously thick for a routine evaluation. However, we've received feedback about concerns regarding your collaboration and knowledge-sharing practices. What kind of concerns? I asked, though I suspected I knew where this was heading. Some colleagues feel that you've been unnecessarily secretive about system procedures, Sandra explained. In today's collaborative environment, we need team members who embrace transparency and open communication. The accusations were fabricated from whole cloth designed to justify a predetermined decision. I had spent 3 years training team members, documenting procedures, and sharing knowledge whenever it didn't compromise security protocols. But apparently, my refusal to hand over Guardian Protocol authentication codes constituted lack of teamwork. I've always been transparent about system operations, I replied, but certain security protocols require restricted access to prevent unauthorized modifications. That's cybersecurity 101. Gladys, we understand your commitment to security, Sandra said in the tone people use when they're about to explain why your commitment is actually a problem. But Megatech's integrated approach requires comprehensive documentation and shared administrative responsibilities. Alex Morrison appeared in the doorway like a shark sensing blood in the water. "How's our year-end review going?" "We're discussing documentation requirements and collaboration expectations," Sandra replied. Alex Morrison settled into the chair next to Sandra's desk with the confidence of someone who owned the building. "Gladys, we need complete system documentation by December 31st. No more delays, no more partial information. Everything." "I understand the timeline," I said, "but rushing security protocol documentation creates vulnerabilities that could compromise the entire infrastructure." "The vulnerabilities we're concerned about," Alex replied, "involve knowledge concentration in single points of failure. That's not sustainable in a modern corporate environment." The irony was almost too perfect. They were worried about single points of failure while planning to eliminate the person who understood how to prevent system failures. On December 31st, I received an email from Sandra Fleming with the subject line, "Year-end appreciation and bonus information." The message thanked me for my dedication and informed me that my performance bonus would be deposited on January 2nd as part of the company's clean slate financial reset. I stared at that email for a long time, understanding that it was probably the last positive communication I would receive from TechFlow management. They were keeping up appearances until the very end, maintaining the illusion of employment security while preparing to pull the corporate rug out from under my feet. That evening, I spent New Year's Day with my family watching fireworks over Lake Washington and pretending that January 2nd wouldn't bring the professional betrayal I knew was coming. My parents asked about work, and I told them everything was fine because what else do you say when you're 24 hours away from discovering whether 3 years of your life had been worth anything to the people who benefited from it? But I also spent part of that evening logged into the TechFlow system, running routine maintenance checks and monitoring the Guardian Protocol status indicators. That's when I discovered that my access permissions had been gradually downgraded over the past week without any notification. Alex Morrison and Linda Parker had been systematically copying my work and preparing to eliminate my position. File access logs showed late-night copying sessions, unauthorized documentation transfers, and attempted access to encrypted security files. The clean slate reorganization wasn't about corporate evolution. It was about stealing intellectual property while eliminating the person who created it. I activated the final Guardian Protocol modification, making my admin account the single authentication key for the entire infrastructure. If my access disappeared suddenly, the system would interpret that as a security breach and automatically protect all data by moving it to encrypted servers that only I could access. If they wanted to betray me, they would discover that some systems are designed to protect against exactly that kind of corporate treachery. January 2nd arrived like a hangover after a party I hadn't enjoyed. I woke up at 6 a.m. with the queasy feeling that comes from knowing your life is about to change in ways you can't control. The email notification chime from my phone sounded like a funeral bell. But instead of checking my messages immediately, I made coffee, showered, and ate breakfast with the deliberate calm of someone preparing for battle. Whatever Alex Morrison and Sandra Fleming had planned, I wanted to face it with dignity and complete awareness of what I had built into the Guardian Protocol. At 2:17 in the morning, while I was running a routine system monitoring check, the termination email arrived with the corporate equivalent of a midnight assassination. The subject line read, "Employment status update, effective immediately. Dear Gladys." The automated message began as if a computer program was expressing personal regret. Due to organizational restructuring and position elimination effective January 2nd, your employment with TechFlow Solutions is terminated immediately. Your final paycheck, including accrued vacation time and the previously announced year-end bonus, will be processed according to standard company policies. No phone call, no explanation. No opportunity for discussion or transition planning. Just a corporate form letter delivered in the middle of the night like they were ashamed of what they were doing. The email continued with instructions for returning company equipment and accessing Cobra health insurance options. It thanked me for my valuable contributions in language so generic it could have been copied from a template designed for firing janitors or chief executives with equal efficiency. But the most telling detail was the immediate badge deactivation notice. My access to all TechFlow systems would be revoked within 5 minutes of the email delivery to ensure security protocol compliance and protect proprietary information. The irony was breathtaking. They were eliminating my access to protect proprietary information that I had created. I watched my administrative dashboard as the deactivation process began. Security clearances disappeared one by one as the automated system revoked my permissions according to standard termination procedures. Level 5 access vanished. Level 4 privileges evaporated. Level 3 clearances dissolved. That's when the Guardian protocol detected what it was designed to recognize: sudden, unauthorized elimination of key administrative personnel without proper transition procedures. Warning indicators began flashing across my monitoring screens like Christmas lights having a seizure. Alert: suspicious administrative activity detected. Warning: key personnel access terminated without transition authorization. Security threat, potential corporate espionage, or hostile takeover in progress. The Guardian protocol initiated its 36-minute countdown to complete data protection. Everything I had built, every customer database, every financial record, every piece of proprietary software would be moved to encrypted offshore servers that only I could access. My phone started ringing immediately. David Rodriguez called first, his voice tight with panic. Gladys, what the hell is happening? Every system is throwing security alerts and talking about data protection protocols. The overnight monitoring team is freaking out. They fired me, I said simply. The Guardian protocol is doing exactly what it was designed to do when key personnel are eliminated without proper procedures. Can you stop it? I could, I admitted. But they ignored every warning I gave them about proper transition requirements. This is what happens when you prioritize cost-cutting over cybersecurity. The countdown reached 28 minutes. Automated backup systems attempted to engage but failed because the Guardian protocol was interpreting the sudden personnel change as a security breach that required data isolation rather than standard backup procedures. Janet Torres called next, her voice carrying the kind of stress that comes from watching financial disaster unfold in real time. Gladys, I'm looking at alerts saying all our financial systems are about to shut down. Please tell me there's a way to fix this. There is, I replied. But it requires management to acknowledge that they made a serious error in judgment. What kind of error? The kind where you fire the person who designed your security systems without following the procedures she spent 3 years explaining were necessary to prevent exactly this situation. 22 minutes remaining. The automated alerts were now flooding every phone and email account in the company. Managers who probably couldn't spell cybersecurity were receiving detailed notifications about impending data protection protocols and system shutdown procedures. Brian Davis from the security department called with questions that revealed how little anyone else understood about what was happening. Gladys, these alerts are mentioning corporate espionage and hostile takeovers. Are we under attack? The system thinks you are, I explained. When you eliminate the primary administrator without following transition protocols, the Guardian protocol assumes something malicious is happening. But we're not under attack. It's just a personnel change. Try explaining that to a security system that was specifically designed to protect against corporate betrayal, I said. The protocol doesn't recognize the difference between hostile takeovers and hostile management decisions. 15 minutes left. I could hear panic spreading through the TechFlow offices, even from my apartment 12 miles away. David Rodriguez kept me updated as chaos erupted across every department. Alex Morrison is running around like his hair's on fire, David reported. Linda Parker is screaming at her laptop. Sandra Fleming is making phone calls to people who probably don't want to hear from her at 3 a.m. Any word from corporate leadership? I asked. Nobody above Alex Morrison seems to exist at this hour, David replied. But rumor has it the board members are being contacted for an emergency meeting. 10 minutes remaining. The Guardian Protocol sent final warnings to all registered emergency contacts, explaining that data protection measures would engage automatically unless proper authorization codes were provided by authenticated administrative personnel. That's when my phone rang with a call from Alex Morrison himself. Gladys. His voice carried the kind of desperation usually reserved for natural disasters. We need you to stop this immediately. Provide the override codes. Hello, Alex, I replied with the calmness of someone who had spent 3 years preparing for this exact moment. I see you've discovered what happens when you ignore cybersecurity protocols. This is not the time for games, Alex snapped. The entire company infrastructure is about to shut down. Fix it. I designed the Guardian Protocol to protect TechFlow's assets from unauthorized access and corporate espionage, I explained. Sudden termination of key personnel without proper transition procedures triggers automatic data protection measures. We're not corporate spies. We're the management team. The system doesn't recognize that distinction, I said. To the Guardian Protocol, eliminating the primary administrator without following established procedures looks exactly like a hostile takeover. 8 minutes remaining. Alex Morrison's desperation was becoming palpable through the phone connection. What do you want? He asked. What will it take to get those override codes? I want what I've been asking for all along, I replied. Proper transition procedures, 1-year severance package. Formal acknowledgement that this termination violated established cybersecurity protocols, and a written reference letter acknowledging my contributions to TechFlow's security infrastructure. That's extortion, Alex Morrison said. No, I corrected him. Extortion is threatening to harm someone unless they pay you. What I'm doing is explaining the consequences of decisions you made without consulting the person who designed your security systems. 6 minutes left. I could hear Alex Morrison typing frantically in the background, probably trying to access systems that were now completely locked down. You built this system to fail, he accused. I built this system to protect against exactly what you did tonight, I replied. Sudden elimination of key personnel is a classic corporate espionage tactic. The Guardian Protocol responds accordingly. We'll sue you for sabotage. With what evidence? I asked. Everything I did was documented and approved through proper channels. The Guardian Protocol is functioning exactly as designed and as repeatedly explained to management personnel who chose to ignore cybersecurity requirements. 4 minutes remaining. Alex Morrison played his final card. Fine. We'll meet your demands. 1-year severance formal apology reference letter. Just provide the override codes. I laughed, and it felt like the first honest emotion I'd experienced in months. Alex, you had months to implement proper transition procedures. You received detailed warnings about Guardian Protocol requirements. You chose to ignore all of that because you thought you could steal my work and eliminate my position without consequences. So what happens now? Now you discover what it costs to replace 3 years of custom security architecture that you chose to discard, I said. The Guardian Protocol will complete its data protection cycle. Your servers will be wiped clean, and tomorrow morning you'll need to explain to Megatech's board of directors why TechFlow no longer has access to any of its operational data. 2 minutes left. I hung up the phone and turned off the ringer. At exactly 2:53 in the morning, the Guardian Protocol completed its 36-minute countdown. Every server went dark. Every database disappeared. 5 years of company operations vanished into encrypted storage that only I could access. The silence that followed felt like justice. The morning of January 2nd transformed TechFlow Solutions from a thriving technology company into the corporate equivalent of a crime scene. By 6 a.m., the emergency board meeting that Alex Morrison had desperately tried to arrange was in full swing, with executives discovering that their company had become a hollow shell overnight. I woke up to 467 missed calls, 638 text messages, and enough voicemail notifications to crash my phone's message system. The panic was so intense, I could practically feel it radiating through the cellular network, like electromagnetic radiation from a digital meltdown. The first call I returned was to David Rodriguez, who sounded like he had spent the night consuming nothing but coffee and existential dread. "Gladys, it's complete chaos here," David reported. "Every system is dead. Customer databases are gone. Financial records have vanished. Even the email server is showing nothing but error messages." "What's the official company line?" I asked. "Alex Morrison is telling everyone it was a cyber attack by foreign hackers who specifically targeted our infrastructure during the holiday weekend," David said. "Sandra Fleming is backing him up, claiming this was an unprecedented security breach that no one could have predicted." "And what does the IT department think?" "Everyone who understands systems architecture knows exactly what happened," David replied. "You warned them for months about proper transition procedures. They ignored every recommendation. Now they're trying to blame external threats for internal stupidity." By 8 a.m., the financial implications were becoming catastrophic. TechFlow's stock price had plummeted 18% in pre-market trading as word spread about the massive data breach. Customer service phones were ringing constantly, with clients demanding explanations about data security and service availability. Janet Torres called around 9:30, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had spent 3 hours explaining to angry board members why the company's financial systems no longer existed. "Gladys, the board is asking very pointed questions about this cyber attack," Janet said. "They want to know how our security systems could have failed so completely." "What are you telling them?" "The truth," Janet replied. "I've been documenting concerns about IT management decisions for months. Alex Morrison's cost-cutting measures eliminated most of our backup systems. His rush to outsource critical functions violated multiple cybersecurity best practices. I have emails showing you repeatedly warned about the risks of improper personnel transitions." "And how is Alex Morrison responding to that?" "He's claiming you deliberately sabotaged the systems out of spite," Janet said. "But that argument falls apart when you look at the technical evidence. The Guardian protocol functioned exactly as documented in your security specifications." By 10 a.m., the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Cybercrime Unit had arrived to investigate what Alex Morrison was characterizing as an act of domestic terrorism. 2 agents in dark suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent set up shop in TechFlow's main conference room, interviewing employees and examining system logs. Special Agent Sarah Williams called me around 11:30, her voice carrying the professional skepticism of someone who had investigated enough corporate disasters to recognize incompetence disguised as victimhood. "Ms. Patterson, we need to discuss the events of last night," Agent Williams said. "Specifically, the circumstances surrounding the system failure at TechFlow Solutions." "I'd be happy to provide any information that might be helpful," I replied. "Were you involved in designing the security protocols that failed last night?" "The security protocols didn't fail," I corrected her. "They functioned exactly as designed. The Guardian protocol was specifically created to protect against unauthorized access to critical systems, including access by the company's own management, including access by anyone who eliminated key personnel without following established cybersecurity procedures," I explained. "The system was designed to protect against corporate espionage, hostile takeovers, and internal security threats." Agent Williams asked me to come in for a formal interview that afternoon. I agreed, but first called Marcus Wright to get some perspective on what was happening. "Gladys, this story is already making waves throughout the tech industry. Marcus reported. CloudSecure's board has been getting calls all morning from companies wanting to know if their security systems have similar vulnerabilities. Similar vulnerabilities to what? To management decisions that ignore cybersecurity requirements. Marcus laughed. Your Guardian protocol is being discussed as either the most innovative security system ever designed or the most dangerous employment contract in corporate history. The FBI interview that afternoon felt less like a criminal investigation and more like a cybersecurity consulting session. Agent Williams and her partner, Special Agent Robert Chen, had clearly done their homework about the technical aspects of what had happened. Ms. Patterson, our forensic analysis shows that your system moved all company data to encrypted servers rather than deleting it, Agent Williams explained. Is that correct? Yes, I replied. The Guardian protocol doesn't destroy data. It protects data by moving it to secure locations that can only be accessed through proper authentication procedures. So TechFlow hasn't actually lost their information. They've lost access to their information, I clarified, but the data itself is safe and recoverable through appropriate channels. Special Agent Chen leaned forward with the intensity of someone solving a puzzle. What would constitute appropriate channels? Acknowledging that proper cybersecurity procedures weren't followed, implementing correct transition protocols, and demonstrating that the security concerns that triggered the Guardian protocol have been addressed. I explained. In other words, Agent Williams said TechFlow can recover their data by admitting they mishandled the termination process. TechFlow can recover their data by following the cybersecurity procedures that were repeatedly explained to management but consistently ignored, I replied. By Thursday afternoon, the FBI had concluded that no criminal activity had occurred. Their report stated that the Guardian protocol had functioned as designed and documented, protecting company assets against what the system had correctly identified as suspicious administrative activity. But the real bombshell came Thursday evening when Agent Williams called with an update that changed everything. Ms. Patterson, our investigation has uncovered some interesting financial irregularities, Agent Williams said. It appears that Alex Morrison and Linda Parker were involved in more than just poor personnel management. What kind of irregularities? The kind that involve embezzlement, kickback schemes, and fraud, Agent Williams replied. Linda Parker's consulting fees were significantly higher than industry standards. Alex Morrison was routing payments through shell companies. The efficiency measures appear to have been an elaborate scheme to steal IT budget funds. The pieces suddenly fell into place like a jigsaw puzzle that had been missing half its parts. The rush to eliminate my position wasn't just about cost-cutting. It was about covering up financial crimes that my detailed system documentation might have exposed. How extensive is the fraud? I asked. Preliminary estimates suggest over $2 million in misappropriated funds over the past 18 months, Agent Williams said. Your Guardian protocol didn't just protect TechFlow's data. It accidentally exposed one of the most sophisticated embezzlement schemes we've seen in the tech industry. That evening, I received an unexpected phone call that would change everything yet again. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the voice belonged to someone whose name I had seen in Forbes magazine. Ms. Patterson, this is Robert Harrison, Chief Executive Officer of Megatech Industries, the voice said. I believe we need to have a conversation. The call from Megatech's CEO felt surreal, like receiving a phone call from someone you've only seen in business magazines and corporate press releases. Robert Harrison's voice carried the kind of authority that comes from running a company worth $47 billion, but also something I hadn't expected: genuine contrition. Ms. Patterson, I want to apologize personally for what happened at TechFlow, Robert Harrison said. Our investigation into the subsidiary management practices has revealed serious misconduct that should never have occurred under the Megatech umbrella. What kind of misconduct? I asked, though Agent Williams had already given me a preview of what was coming. The kind that makes me question how we evaluate acquisition targets and monitor subsidiary operations, Harrison replied. Alex Morrison and Linda Parker weren't just mismanaging personnel decisions. They were running a sophisticated embezzlement operation that used your termination as cover for financial crimes. Over the next 3 hours, Harrison explained what Megatech's internal audit team had discovered. Alex Morrison had been inflating IT consulting costs and routing payments through Linda Parker's company, which then kicked back 60% of the fees to accounts Morrison controlled. The efficiency measures and operational streamlining had been designed to justify budget transfers that funded their personal enrichment. Your Guardian protocol didn't just protect TechFlow's data, Harrison continued. It forced us to conduct the kind of thorough investigation that revealed systematic fraud across multiple departments. How long had this been going on? Based on financial records, approximately 18 months, Harrison said, beginning almost immediately after the TechFlow acquisition. Morrison saw an opportunity to exploit the transition period when oversight was minimal and accountability was unclear. The FBI's investigation was expanding rapidly as federal agents uncovered evidence of wire fraud, money laundering, and violations of federal contracting regulations. Alex Morrison's efficiency consulting had extended beyond TechFlow to other Megatech subsidiaries, creating a network of fraudulent transactions worth millions of dollars. Special Agent Williams called Friday morning with updates that sounded like chapters from a corporate crime novel. We've executed search warrants on Alex Morrison's home and Linda Parker's business offices, Agent Williams reported. The evidence suggests they were planning to expand their operation to additional Megatech subsidiaries before your Guardian protocol forced everything into the open. What happens to TechFlow's employees? I asked. That's where things get interesting, Agent Williams replied. Megatech is taking direct control of the subsidiary to prevent further damage. They want to restore normal operations as quickly as possible, which means they need someone who understands the security systems to oversee data recovery. Someone meaning me. Someone meaning you, Agent Williams confirmed. They're also offering to fund a complete investigation of Morrison's management decisions to identify other employees who may have been wrongfully terminated or targeted for elimination. The irony was almost poetic. The Guardian protocol that Alex Morrison had viewed as an obstacle to his embezzlement scheme had become the key to exposing his crimes and restoring proper corporate governance. Robert Harrison called again Friday afternoon with a proposal that made my head spin. Ms. Patterson, Megatech would like to offer you the position of Chief Information Security Officer for our entire corporation, Harrison said. We need someone who understands how to build security systems that protect against both external threats and internal misconduct. That's quite a jump from systems administrator, I replied. Your Guardian protocol represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need at the enterprise level, Harrison explained. We want to implement similar protections across all Megatech subsidiaries to prevent future incidents like what happened at TechFlow. The offer included a salary that was triple my TechFlow compensation stock options that could be worth millions if Megatech continued growing, and a 2-year guaranteed contract with termination protections that would prevent any future Alex Morrison from destroying my career on a whim. But more importantly, the position would give me authority to implement cybersecurity best practices across dozens of companies, protecting thousands of employees from the kind of corporate betrayal I had experienced. There's one condition, I said, which is, David Rodriguez comes with me as Deputy Chief of Cybersecurity, I replied. He understands the technical architecture and supported me when management was planning my termination. Loyalty like that deserves recognition. Done, Harrison said without hesitation. Anyone else you'd recommend? Janet Torres for Chief Financial Oversight, I suggested. She documented the financial irregularities that helped expose Morrison's fraud. Someone that observant needs to be protecting corporate assets at a higher level. Saturday morning brought news that felt like watching karma deliver justice with surgical precision. Alex Morrison and Linda Parker were arrested at their respective homes on federal charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. The FBI perp walk footage showed them in handcuffs, their corporate confidence replaced by the stunned expression of people who hadn't expected their crimes to be discovered so thoroughly. Sandra Fleming was placed on administrative leave pending investigation of her role in the personnel decisions that had facilitated the embezzlement scheme. Email evidence suggested she had known about the financial irregularities, but had chosen to focus on eliminating employees who might have discovered the fraud. Marcus Wright called that afternoon with an update from the industry perspective. "Gladys, your story is becoming legendary in cybersecurity circles," Marcus reported. "Companies are calling CloudSecure asking about Guardian Protocol implementations. Everyone wants security systems that protect against internal threats as well as external ones. What's the general reaction? Split between admiration and terror." Marcus laughed. "Some executives think you're a genius who created the ultimate corporate accountability system. Others think you're dangerous because you proved that employees can build protections against management misconduct. Which group do you fall into? The group that thinks employees should always protect themselves against corporate betrayal," Marcus said. "You just did it more effectively than anyone thought possible." Sunday evening, I received a call from Brian Davis, TechFlow's former security manager, who had been investigating the technical aspects of what happened. "Gladys, I've been analyzing the Guardian Protocol logs," Brian said. "That system is incredible. It didn't just protect data. It created a complete audit trail of every attempt to access or modify the infrastructure." "That was intentional," I replied. "Security systems should preserve evidence, not just prevent unauthorized access." "The evidence you preserved is what convinced the FBI that Morrison and Parker were running a sophisticated fraud operation," Brian said. "Without the Guardian Protocol forcing a complete investigation, they might have stolen millions more before anyone noticed." By the end of the week, TechFlow's transformation was remarkable. Megatech's direct oversight had restored proper corporate governance, eliminated the toxic management culture that Morrison had created, and implemented financial controls that would prevent future embezzlement schemes. David Rodriguez was promoted to lead the IT department with authority to rebuild the technical team according to proper cybersecurity standards. Janet Torres was offered a position with Megatech's corporate audit division, where her attention to detail could prevent similar fraud across all subsidiaries. Most importantly, the company's culture was being rebuilt around the principles of transparency, accountability, and respect for employee expertise. The lesson had been learned: treating skilled workers as disposable assets creates vulnerabilities that sophisticated criminals can exploit. The Guardian Protocol had done more than protect data. It had protected the integrity of an entire organization by forcing corporate leadership to confront the consequences of their management decisions. Justice was being served, but the real victory was creating a model for how technology could protect workers from corporate betrayal, while simultaneously protecting companies from internal threats. 6 months later, I stood in the Megatech Industries headquarters building in downtown San Francisco, looking out at the Bay Area from the 42nd floor of my new office. The nameplate on my door read Chief Information Security Officer, but the title that mattered most to me was Guardian of Corporate Integrity. The transformation had been remarkable beyond anything I could have imagined that night when the Guardian Protocol triggered its 36-minute countdown. What started as a defensive response to corporate betrayal had evolved into a comprehensive framework for protecting both companies and employees from the kind of misconduct that destroys organizations from within. Alex Morrison and Linda Parker were serving federal prison sentences of 7 and 5 years respectively after pleading guilty to charges that included wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. The government had recovered over $3.2 million in stolen funds money that was returned to Megatech and distributed among the employees whose careers had been damaged by the fraudulent efficiency measures. Sandra Fleming faced civil penalties and professional sanctions that effectively ended her human resources career. The investigation revealed that she had systematically targeted employees who might have discovered the financial irregularities, creating a toxic work environment that facilitated criminal activity. But the real justice came in the form of systemic change that would prevent future incidents. Megatech had implemented Guardian Protocol-inspired security systems across all 43 of its subsidiary companies, creating protections that monitored both external cybersecurity threats and internal governance failures. David Rodriguez had exceeded every expectation as Deputy Chief of Cybersecurity, developing training programs that taught technical staff how to recognize and report suspicious management practices. His ethical technology leadership seminars were becoming industry standards for protecting workers in high-tech environments. Janet Torres had revolutionized Megatech's financial oversight as Chief Financial Compliance Officer, creating audit systems that detected unusual budget transfers and consultant payments before they could fund criminal activity. Her work had already identified and prevented 2 additional embezzlement schemes in other subsidiaries. The TechFlow office had been transformed from a place of fear and uncertainty into a model for collaborative technology development. Marcus Wright had returned as Chief Technology Officer, implementing the kind of supportive leadership culture that encouraged innovation while maintaining rigorous cybersecurity standards. But perhaps the most satisfying change was cultural. The tech industry had begun recognizing that employee protection and corporate security were complementary goals rather than competing priorities. Companies started implementing Guardian protocols that protected both data and the workers who managed critical systems. My speaking engagements were booked solid for the next 2 years, with conferences requesting presentations on building security systems that protect against internal threats and the ethics of cybersecurity architecture. Harvard Business School had developed a case study based on the TechFlow incident, using it to teach MBA students about the importance of ethical leadership and technical expertise. The scholarship fund I established for women in cybersecurity had already supported 47 students pursuing careers in information security. Each recipient received not just financial support, but mentorship in building security systems that protect both organizations and individuals from abuse of power. Robert Harrison had become more than just a CEO. He had become an advocate for corporate governance reform that valued employee expertise and ethical business practices. Under his leadership, Megatech had become the first major corporation to implement comprehensive protections for technical workers who reported security concerns or management misconduct. The TechFlow incident taught us that treating skilled employees as disposable creates vulnerabilities that criminals can exploit, Harrison explained during a Fortune magazine interview. Protecting workers isn't just the right thing to do. It's essential for protecting shareholder value and corporate integrity. The Guardian Protocol had evolved beyond my original design, becoming a template for security systems that protected democratic institutions, nonprofit organizations, and educational institutions from both external threats and internal corruption. The National Institute of Standards and Technology had incorporated Guardian Protocol principles into federal cybersecurity guidelines. But the personal transformation was equally significant. I had gone from being a disposable systems administrator to being recognized as one of the leading experts in ethical cybersecurity architecture. The betrayal that was meant to destroy my career had instead launched it into realms I had never imagined possible. More importantly, I had learned that building systems to protect against betrayal wasn't just about technology. It was about understanding that true security requires trust, respect, and accountability at every level of an organization. The lesson that emerged from those 36 minutes wasn't about revenge or retaliation. It was about the power of foresight, the importance of ethical principles, and the recognition that the best security systems protect everyone from the consequences of poor judgment and bad faith. Companies that prioritize short-term profits over employee loyalty discover that betrayal creates vulnerabilities that sophisticated criminals can exploit. Organizations that value expertise, implement proper governance, and treat skilled workers with respect create environments where innovation thrives and security is maintained through collaboration rather than surveillance. The most powerful protection against corporate betrayal isn't building systems that punish misconduct. It's building relationships based on mutual respect and shared commitment to ethical behavior. Today, when I look at the cityscape from my office window, I see something different than I saw 6 months ago. I see a business environment that's becoming more accountable, more ethical, and more protective of the people whose expertise makes modern commerce possible. The Guardian Protocol didn't just protect TechFlow's data during those crucial 36 minutes. It protected the principle that technical expertise deserves respect, that ethical behavior creates lasting value, and that the best security systems serve both organizations and individuals by preventing abuse of power. The real victory wasn't watching Alex Morrison and Linda Parker face justice for their crimes. The real victory was creating a model for how technology can protect the fundamental values that make corporations worth working for and worth protecting. Sometimes the best revenge is living well and using your talents to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced workplace betrayal that made you question your faith in corporate loyalty? How do you think companies can better protect both their assets and their employees from internal threats? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you found this story engaging. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about workplace justice and personal triumph, and share this with anyone who needs to understand that standing up for your principles can lead to outcomes beyond your wildest imagination. Thank you for listening, and remember that the skills you build to protect yourself often end up protecting others in ways you never expected.